Nathaniel Okafor was 37 years old when he read the words "blessed with the perfect husband" on his wife's Instagram page, and understood, in the same moment, that he was looking at a caption written by a woman who had never believed a single word of it. For 9 years he had been a devoted husband, a civil structural engineer who'd spent the last 6 of those years quietly growing a consulting practice out of a spare bedroom until it employed 11 people and held contracts with 3 county governments. He drove a 2016 Jeep Cherokee with a dented rear gate he'd been meaning to replace since the year before last. He packed his own lunch. He cooked dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays because Camille worked late on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Or said she did, and he had never once thought to check. Her friends called him Steady Nate at their dinner parties, the way people describe a family car rather than a man. And in 9 years, he had never thought to be offended by it. That same night, the post went live. 314 likes. 47 comments, the little red heart emoji repeated in a chain like an incantation. Nathaniel opened the family laptop to print a materials report and found an email thread Camille had forgotten to close. 14 months of correspondence. A man named Devin Marsh. Hotel receipts totaling $22,400, paid from a joint credit card she had applied for without telling him, and kept in her name only. Charged in small amounts she had described to him as work lunches and continuing education fees, and a single message, sent 11 days before the Instagram post, in which Camille had written the sentence that would appear in a legal filing 4 months later. Nate doesn't see anything. He never has. That's what makes him so easy to manage. She had no idea that 6 hours before she posted that caption, Nathaniel had received written confirmation that his firm's proposal had been selected for a $7.8 million infrastructure rehabilitation contract. A contract that would, within 90 days, make Okafor Structural the largest minority-owned engineering consultancy in the state. What Camille set into motion that night, believing she had already won, would cost her everything she had been quietly counting as hers. Before we get into the story, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you are not going to want to miss. The alarm on Nathaniel Okafor's phone went off at 5:30 a.m., the same time it had gone off for 9 years, through every season of the marriage and every phase of the business, through the lean years and the better ones, and he had never once hit snooze. He swung his legs out of bed in the gray half-dark and went downstairs barefoot, the way he always did, careful not to wake Camille on the mornings she'd come in late, which had been most mornings for the past several months. The kitchen was quiet except for the low murmur of the morning news he kept at a volume that wouldn't carry upstairs. He filled the kettle, ground the coffee by hand the way his father had done, a ritual he'd picked up in his parents' house in Enugu and carried to every apartment and house he'd lived in since. And while the water heated, he opened his laptop at the kitchen island and reviewed the structural calculations he'd been refining for the Harmon County Bridge rehabilitation proposal. The numbers were right. He'd looked at them 6 times over the past 2 weeks, measuring twice the way he measured everything, once for accuracy and once for everything the first reading might have missed. He capped his pen, closed the folder, and poured his coffee. He drove to the office in the Cherokee, 41 minutes door-to-door on a clear morning, with a road trip playlist his youngest brother Emeka had made for him 3 years ago, still loaded on the stereo, because he'd never gotten around to changing it. The rear gate rattled faintly on left turns, a rattle he'd grown so accustomed to that he only noticed it now when passengers flinched. Nobody rode in the passenger seat on the morning commute. The seat held a canvas bag with a change of clothes, a yellow legal pad he used for field notes, and a thermos of the same coffee he'd made at 5:30, screwed shut tight. Okafor Structural ran out of a converted two-story townhouse in the University District, a building he'd bought at auction 7 years earlier for $310,000 and renovated himself on weekends over 8 months. New electrical, new plumbing. Every wall opened and closed again with his own hands until the building was precisely what his drawings said it should be. His name was on the deed. It had been on the deed since the day he'd signed at closing, before the practice had its second employee, before the county contracts, before any of it had become something a person from the outside could look at and recognize as built. He and Camille had met during his second year running the firm solo at a fundraiser dinner for an arts nonprofit where she worked in development. She had been quick-witted and warm that night, the kind of person who makes a room feel smaller and safer just by being confident inside it. And he had asked for her number without rehearsing it, which was unusual enough for him that he had noted the moment afterward as significant. They married 2 years later at a small ceremony in his parents' back garden in the fall. 63 guests. His mother's caterers, Desmond as best man. The first 3 years were, in most of the ways that matter, what they appeared to be. She came to his first county contract signing and photographed him shaking the project director's hand and sent the image to both their families with a caption that said, "That's my husband." He had looked at that photograph more than once in the months that followed the open laptop, trying to identify the exact moment the warmth in it had been genuine and the exact moment it had not been, and had never been able to find the seam. By year 5, something had calcified. She stopped asking about the projects. She stopped coming to the office for the small celebrations, a contract signed, a site closed on schedule that the team marked with takeout from the Thai place on the corner. She had started saying when things improve in reference to their finances in a tone that assumed things had not improved, looking at the salary depositing into their joint account and concluding that what she saw was the sum total of what existed, without ever once asking whether there might be a different set of documents telling a different story. He had never volunteered those documents. He had never locked them away. Either they were in the drawer of his home office, the second drawer from the top, available to anyone who thought to look. In 9 years, no one had looked. The morning he would remember later, as the last ordinary morning began, with a mistake someone else had made. His senior engineer, Priya, had flagged a discrepancy in a sub-consultant's soil report for the Harmon County proposal. A bearing capacity assumption that was 12% too optimistic. The kind of error that would pass through most review cycles unchallenged and only reveal itself when concrete was already in the ground and something shifted. Nathaniel found it in the report at 9:15 a.m., sitting across from Priya at the conference table, tracing the assumption backward through 3 pages of calculations with a red pen. "Here," he said, circling a single line, "and here's where it propagates." He didn't say it with irritation. He said it the way a man says it when finding the mistake is simply what the work requires. Priya had been with him for 4 years and knew the difference between him catching an error and him blaming a person for one. "We need a revised geotech report by Thursday," he said. "I'll call Harmon's project manager myself. We're not late, but I want them to know we caught it before they did." He recapped the pen and slid the report back across the table. Correcting a sub-consultant error on your own initiative before submission is not a problem. Missing it is. He made the call at 9:47 a.m. It took 11 minutes. He spent the rest of the morning running the corrected calculations, made a note in the project file with the exact time and content of every decision, and went to lunch at his desk with the meal he'd packed that morning: roasted yam, black beans, a container of his mother's pepper sauce that she'd sent home with him at the last Sunday dinner, decanted into a clean jar with a lid. His mother, Grace, called at 2:00 p.m. She called every Tuesday at 2:00 p.m. She asked how Camille was. He said she was well. His mother was quiet for precisely the length of time it takes a woman who has known her son for 37 years to decide whether to pursue a line of questioning or let it rest. And then she let it rest and asked instead about the Harmon proposal. He told her it was looking strong. She told him she was praying for it. He told her he appreciated that, which was true. That evening he stopped at the grocery store on the way home to pick up the ingredients for jollof rice, Camille's stated favorite meal, because she had texted him at 4:30 saying she was coming home early and maybe they could have a quiet dinner, just the two of them, the way they used to. He stood in the produce aisle reading the text twice, and he felt something that was close to relief. The specific relief of a man who has noticed a slow accumulation of wrong things and is still, because he is that kind of man, looking for the evidence that he is wrong about what he has noticed. He was in the kitchen when she came home at 6:45, rice on the stove, kitchen smelling of tomatoes and Scotch bonnet. And she kissed him on the cheek with the specific automation of a person who has been kissing someone on the cheek for so long that the action no longer requires them to arrive fully in the room to do it. She poured herself a glass of wine, sat at the island, and began scrolling her phone. At 7:02 p.m., he would check the timestamp later, and the timestamp would matter. She held her phone horizontally, took a photograph of the kitchen, and typed something he couldn't see from where he stood at the stove. At 7:11 p.m., while she was in the bathroom before dinner, her phone buzzed against the island counter. He glanced at it out of reflex. The notification preview on the screen read 47 comments. He didn't pick it up. He served the rice. After dinner, she said she had emails to get through and went upstairs. He cleaned the kitchen, the way he always did, dried the pots and put them away in the exact order they'd lived in the cabinet for 9 years, and sat down at the kitchen island at 9:15 p.m. with the family laptop to print the corrected project file for the morning. He almost didn't open the browser. He'd planned to go straight to print, folder already queued. But the browser was already open, Camille's email client, maximized. A thread running down the left panel with the name Devin Marsh in bold at the top of 4 separate threads, the most recent timestamped 5 hours earlier. He sat completely still. He did not touch the mouse for what felt like a very long time, and was, when he checked his phone later, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. He read it. All of it. He moved through the thread slowly, the way he moved through a set of structural drawings when he was looking for the single point of failure the rest of the document had been built to obscure. Hotel names. Dates. The name of a restaurant he'd driven past 100 times without knowing it would one day mean something specific and bad to him. A message from Devin Marsh sent 8 weeks earlier. She still doesn't know? And Camille's response, 3 minutes later, he doesn't see anything. He comes home, he cooks, he sleeps. He's not paying attention. And the one that he would read 3 times, the one dated 11 days before the Instagram post with its 314 likes and its 47 comments, Nate doesn't see anything. He never has. That's what makes him so easy to manage. His hands were flat on the table beside the keyboard, not gripping anything. Flat. The way you lay your hands on a surface when you want to make sure you are still in contact with something solid. He did not close the laptop. He scrolled back to the beginning of the thread and read every message again, this time noting dates, noting amounts, cross-referencing a payment he found in a folder labeled SEMISC fees in the email's attachment archive against a credit card statement clipped to the inside of the folder. A card in Camille's name alone. A Visa ending in 4417. A card he had never seen a statement for. A card with a $34,000 balance, $22,400 of which resolved when he matched the charge dates against the email thread into 14 hotel stays across 11 months. He read the hotel receipts twice. The second time he read them, he matched the dates against his own calendar, the project management app on his phone, which he used to track site visits, client meetings, travel days. 11 of the 14 hotel stays overlapped with dates he was out of town. Not all of them. 3 of the stays had occurred on nights he had been home, in the same house, 40 minutes from the hotel. He had cooked dinner on at least 2 of those nights. He was nearly certain about that because Tuesday was always his cooking night, and 2 of the 3 dates were Tuesdays. He sat with this for a moment. Then he got up, went to the printer in his home office, and printed the full email thread, 41 pages, the credit card statement, and a calendar grid he marked by hand with each hotel date cross-referenced against his own travel log. He dated the printouts in the margin with the time, 10:47 p.m., and his initials, the same way he dated engineering field notes. Because dating documents in the moment was a habit so ingrained he did it automatically, and because part of him already understood that what he was looking at was not simply the end of a marriage, but the beginning of a case. He placed everything inside a manila folder from the bottom drawer of his desk, the drawer that held his own important documents, the ones Camille had never once asked to look at in 9 years of marriage, and carried it upstairs. He set it on his nightstand. He looked at Camille sleeping in the bed they'd shared for 9 years, her face entirely still. The specific piece of a person who had not yet been told the story was over. He lay down on his side of the mattress and stared at the ceiling until the alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. He got up. He ground the coffee. He did not wake her. At 8 a.m. sharp, he called Raymond Cole, a family law attorney he'd been introduced to 3 years earlier at an engineering association dinner. A man who had handed him a business card with the quiet confidence of someone who understood that the people most likely to need a divorce attorney were the people least likely to be looking for one. He'd kept the card in his wallet without ever asking himself why. Raymond's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown with a view of the river, and he listened to the entirety of what Nathaniel laid on his desk: the printed email thread, the credit card statement, the hotel receipts totaling $22,400, the folder labeled Say Misc Fees, and, separately, the Harmon County confirmation letter, which Nathaniel had received by email at 11:47 a.m. the previous day and printed that morning because it belonged in the file. With the specific stillness of a man who has heard most variations of this story and is currently deciding which variation of his response is required. "The credit card is the most important piece," Raymond said, pulling the statement toward him. "In her name only. Balance she's been servicing from a joint account without disclosure. That's marital waste. It's documented, it's dated, and it's substantial." He looked at the hotel receipts. "Combined with the email record, you have a clear pattern. We can work with this." He set the papers down and looked at Nathaniel directly. "Now, tell me about the business." Nathaniel told him everything. The townhouse bought at auction before the marriage had hit its 3rd year. The practice structured as an LLC in his name only. Incorporated 6 years ago, before the 2nd employee, before the 1st county contract. The building deed. The business account, separate and always separate, from which he paid himself a salary that landed in the joint account. The salary Camille had seen, the part of the picture she had built her calculations on. Not the part below it. The equity, the contracts, the building, the 11 employees, the $7.8 million proposal that had just been selected, the entire architecture of what he had built, quietly, in the years she had spent finding him easy to manage. Raymond sat with this for a moment. "The business is yours," he said. The building is yours. If no marital funds were used to capitalize or grow either one, and it sounds like they weren't, none of it is part of the marital estate. What she knows about your financial position is, I'm guessing, limited to your salary deposits." He paused. "Which means the picture she has been operating from is significantly incomplete." "Significantly," Nathaniel said. It was the only word he offered. Raymond told him what Raymond always told clients at this stage. Say nothing, change nothing, alter no routine, move no money, delete nothing. Let Camille believe everything is exactly as she left it when she went to sleep. Every day she believes that. She makes decisions based on an incomplete picture, and every one of those decisions will matter. "There's one more thing I need," Raymond said. "I'm going to bring in a forensic accountant. I want the full picture on the C. Miskfees card. If she's been routing marital money through it, I want that documented before we file." Nathaniel nodded. "How long?" 3 weeks, Raymond said. 4 at the outside. Then we move." Raymond told him one more thing before he left the office that afternoon. He was going to have Nathaniel's firm independently valued. Not because it was in dispute, it wasn't. But because a documented professional valuation on file before the other side had time to commission their own would anchor every subsequent conversation. He wanted the number established in writing and in Raymond's possession before Camille's attorney had a chance to speculate. The valuation was completed by an independent firm 2 weeks later. They assessed Okafor Structural, the practice, the contracts, the building, the client relationships, at $4.1 million on a conservative basis, $5.7 million at market value, including the Harmon contract. Raymond put it in the file without comment. He would produce it when and if it was needed. It was the kind of document that answered questions before the questions were fully formed. He drove back to the office and worked the rest of the day the way he always worked, methodically, without announcement, his face giving away nothing that his face had never given away to begin with. The 3 weeks that followed were the most precise performance of his ordinary life that Nathaniel had ever put on. He came home at the same time. He cooked on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He attended Camille's cousin's bridal shower gift drop-off, carried the box to the door, smiled at the right moments. He watched her post 4 more photographs to Instagram over 18 days, a sunset she'd photographed from what appeared to be a hotel balcony, credited to a needed girl's weekend upstate. A brunch plate she described as treating myself. A photo of him, taken from behind as he worked at the kitchen island, captioned, "He doesn't even know I'm watching." 112 likes. He did not tell her he had seen it. He did not tell anyone he had seen anything. During those same 3 weeks, Camille was not standing still. She posted twice more on the Instagram account, both from locations that did not match what she had told him she was doing that evening. The second post went up on a Thursday night, a photograph of a restaurant table set for 2. A glass of red wine in the foreground, the kind of carefully framed image that takes several attempts to get right. And it went live at 8:14 p.m., which was the same Thursday she had told him she had a late nonprofit board meeting. He saw the notification at 8:22 p.m. while sitting at his desk reviewing the revised geotech numbers. He noted the time in the margin of his legal pad next to the project notes and went back to the geotech numbers. She had also, at some point in the weeks before and during the 3 weeks of quiet, purchased a new handbag, a structured leather tote in a cognac color he didn't recognize, a brand whose name he looked up later when he found the box in the recycling, a brand whose entry-level pieces started at $640. He had seen the box on a Tuesday morning without commenting on it, the same morning he had cooked eggs for both of them and cleaned the pan afterward, while she scrolled her phone with the new bag hanging from the kitchen island stool beside her. She had not mentioned the bag. He had not asked about it. The box went into the recycling by that afternoon, and neither of them said a word about it, which was, he understood later, the full architecture of the problem compressed into a single morning. His closest friend, Desmond, not a colleague, not a professional contact, but a man he'd known since the first week of university, who lived 40 minutes away and had been the best man at his wedding and the first person he'd told, the Thursday after the discovery. Over 2 bottles of beer in Desmond's garage with the door down, had sat across from him and said nothing for 60 full seconds before saying, quietly, and with considerable restraint, "I want to drive to that hotel and put Devon Marsh through a wall." "You won't," Nathaniel said. "I know I won't," Desmond said. "I'm stating a preference." He drank his beer. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing right now. In 3 weeks, maybe something. I'll be here." He said it the way a load-bearing wall says it, without drama, simply by remaining. Desmond was the only person Nathaniel told. Not his mother. Not his brothers. Not the 11 people who worked for him and knew something was wrong because Nathaniel's face, to people who studied it professionally, had a single tell. He became slightly more precise than usual. His sentences a fraction shorter. His movements a degree more deliberate. Priya mentioned to Marcus, the firm's project coordinator, that the principal seemed like he was in calculation mode, the way he got before a bid submission. She was not wrong. She just didn't know what the bid was for. Priya mentioned to Marcus, the firm's project coordinator, that the principal seemed like he was in calculation mode, the way he got before a bid submission. She was not wrong. She just didn't know what the bid was for. His team noticed nothing else because there was nothing else to notice. He ran the morning stand-ups at 8:30, the same way he always ran them. Concise, direct, specific to the work on the table that day. He reviewed the revised Harmon drawings on the Thursday of the second week and caught a rebar placement inconsistency in a foundation detail that the drafter had missed, marked it with a note in red, and left it on the drawing board before the drafter arrived. The same way he always handled those corrections, because the work deserved accuracy regardless of what was happening in his kitchen at home. That was how he did everything. Meanwhile, Camille's behavior during those 3 weeks was, in retrospect, exactly what a person behaves like when they believe no one is watching. She told her sister, in a phone call Nathaniel overheard through a door left open 2 inches while he was getting a glass of water at midnight. A call she would later be unable to explain the timing of, that she had been putting together an exit for 8 months, and that the business stuff is all in his name but the man barely pays himself, so there's not much there. She said, with a confidence that was specifically architectural, built out of a picture she had never once asked him to verify against reality. "It's a small firm, Tasha. It's not like there's some hidden money. What you see is what there is." He stood in the hallway outside the door in the dark, holding an empty glass, and let her finish. On the Thursday of the 4th week, Raymond called at 3 p.m. with a forensic accounting summary. The CMISC fees card had been active for 14 months. Total charges, $31,700. Of that, $19,400 was traceable to joint account transfers, money that had moved from the account where Nathaniel's salary deposited into a personal account in Camille's name, and from there to the card, in amounts between $800 and $2,200, each transfer timed during weeks when Nathaniel had traveled for site visits. 11 transactions. 14 months. A system that had worked without interruption because the man it was built around had trusted what he was shown and had never had a reason to look behind it. "She's been servicing an affair on marital funds for over a year," Raymond said. "Documented, dated, categorized, We file Monday. Nathaniel thought about the Instagram post. He thought about the 47 comments and the chain of red hearts. He thought about the word blessed. File Monday, he said. He asked for one thing beyond the legal strategy, that the timing of service be aligned with a moment he chose rather than a moment the process server chose at random. He wanted to be home when the papers arrived. Not to watch, not to perform anything, simply to be present for the end of a story he had been living inside without knowing it was ending. The papers were served at 6:30 p.m. on a Monday, 48 hours after Raymond had filed, while Nathaniel sat at the kitchen island with his legal pad and a cup of tea he'd made at 6:15. He heard the doorbell. He heard Camille answer it. He heard the door close. He heard nothing for 20 seconds, and then he heard her footsteps on the hardwood coming toward the kitchen, and she came through the doorway holding a manila envelope, the way you hold something that has changed its weight in your hands between the front door and the kitchen. She looked at him for a long moment. He set down the pen. "You've been to a lawyer," she said. It was not quite a question. "I have," he said. "Because of—" She stopped. She looked at the envelope. She looked back at him. "You found the emails." "I found everything," he said. "The emails, the visa ending in 4417, the 14 hotel stays, the transfers, all of it." He picked up the pen again, not to write anything, just to have something in his hand. Raymond Cole filed for dissolution on Friday. The credit card balance of $31,700, $19,400 of which came out of our joint account, is documented as marital waste. It comes off your side of the settlement before division. The business and the building are mine, both predating the marriage. No marital funds ever used in either. Raymond says the case is straightforward. She sat down at the island across from him. The wine she had been about to pour sat unopened on the counter behind her. "Nate," she said, in a voice that was the first genuine thing he had heard from her in longer than he could precisely calculate. "I'm sorry. I know it doesn't cover it. I know that." "I know you're sorry," he said. He said it evenly, without heat, the way he said things that were simply true. "I also know you're sorry because it didn't work out the way you planned, and I need you to understand the difference between those two things and which one is actually in this room." She looked at the manila envelope in her hands, then back at him. "You saw the post," she said. "I saw the post," he said. "And then I opened the laptop." She put the envelope on the island. She pressed one hand flat on top of it, the same gesture he had made with his hand on the folder the night of the discovery, though she didn't know that and he wasn't going to tell her. "I wasn't going to take anything that wasn't. I mean, the plan was never to hurt you. It was just, the plan was to leave," he said, still level. "That's not what I'm disputing. The plan was to leave, and you decided to fund the leaving with marital money across 14 months, and to describe me to the man you were leaving me for as easy to manage, while posting my name on the internet next to a religious caption that 17 of your coworkers liked and 2 of your cousins shared." He let that sit for a second. "That is what I am disputing. Not the leaving." She didn't respond to that. There was nothing to respond to that wasn't an admission. "The business," she said finally, shifting to what she'd clearly been building toward since she sat down. "You said it's all yours. But 9 years of me supporting you while you built it? That has to count for something. There has to be. Raymond will send your attorney the full financials," Nathaniel said, "including the Harmon County contract, which was confirmed on the same day you posted the caption. $7.8 million over 3 years. He watched her face absorb this the way a structure absorbs a load it was not designed for, not all at once, but in the specific sequence of a failure, the number landing, the implications moving out from the number like cracks from an impact point. the expression on her face shifting from negotiation to something that had no good name. He continued quietly, "The business valuation will also be in that package. Raymond had it done 4 weeks ago. I wanted your attorney to have the actual number rather than an estimate built on assumptions." He paused, which is more consideration than was extended to me. He picked up his pen. "The picture you had of this marriage and what was in it was one you built without ever asking me a real question about my work in 9 years. You assumed there wasn't much to know, and you made every decision you made based on that assumption. And the assumption was wrong." He stood, capped his pen, and placed it precisely beside the legal pad. "Raymond will be in touch with your attorney by Wednesday," he said. He picked up his tea and went to his home office, and she sat alone at the island in a kitchen that still smelled of the jollof rice he had cooked for her 2 weeks earlier, holding a manila envelope and a picture of a life she had miscalculated from the first assumption all the way to the last. Devin Marsh, Nathaniel learned in the weeks that followed, was a regional sales manager for a medical equipment distributor, twice divorced, currently 18 months into a lease on a downtown apartment he was paying for on a salary and a commission structure that had not had a strong quarter in 2 years. He had told Camille, at some point in the 14 months, that he had investment property in 2 cities. The investment property turned out to be a timeshare and a half interest in a rental condo that was generating negative cash flow. When it became apparent, sometime in the 6 weeks after the papers were served, that there was no windfall coming from Nathaniel's side of a marriage Camille was now exiting, Devin Marsh's availability declined sharply. His texts came less frequently. His answers to her calls grew shorter. By the 8th week after filing, according to Camille's sister, who passed this along to Desmond, who passed it along to Nathaniel without editorializing, Devin Marsh had stopped responding entirely. He was not a man who had been waiting for her. He was a man who had been waiting for the version of her circumstances that she had described to him. And when that version failed to materialize, he moved on to the next description. Camille sat alone in the kitchen for a long time after Nathaniel went to his office that Monday evening. The wine she hadn't poured was still on the counter. The manila envelope was on the island in front of her. Open now, the pages of the petition spread out in the order the process server had handed them to her. She read the section detailing the credit card, the dates, the amounts, the documentation of transfers she had believed were invisible. And she understood, in the specific way that understanding arrives when it is unwelcome and complete, that he had known for longer than she had any way of calculating. He had cooked dinner. He had cleaned the kitchen. He had attended her cousin's bridal shower gift drop-off and carried the box to the door. He had done all of that while knowing. She tried to count back to the moment he must have found it, and the counting made the kitchen feel smaller with each week she added. She thought about the post. She thought about the 47 comments, and the word blessed, and the particular satisfaction of writing a caption that she knew was false and watching people believe it. And she understood that what she had taken for cleverness was the most expensive mistake she had made in 9 years of marriage. She had posted that caption sitting in his kitchen, on his Wi-Fi, photographing a meal he had cooked. And the man she had described to another man as easy to manage had already, as of 6 hours earlier, signed a contract worth more money than she had ever known him to earn in a single year. She had built a picture. She had lived inside it for years. She had never once thought to check if it was real. Camille retained an attorney named Sandra Park, who reviewed the financials Raymond sent over and called Raymond the following Thursday to discuss the parameters of a negotiated settlement. She called back 2 days later with Camille's position, which was that the business equity should be considered marital property on the grounds that Nathaniel had grown it substantially during the marriage. Raymond sent the LLC operating agreement, the building deed, the original capitalization documents from 6 years ago, and a forensic accounting report showing that not a single dollar of joint or marital funds had ever been invested in, loaned to, or used to operate Okafor Structural. Sandra Park had a follow-up conversation with Raymond that lasted 9 minutes. She called Camille after that call. The call to Camille lasted 22 minutes. On the Friday of the following week, Camille's attorney communicated that her client was prepared to accept a negotiated settlement without contesting the business or the building. The settlement was finalized 11 weeks after filing. Camille received her half of the joint savings account, $44,200, reduced by $19,400 in documented marital waste from the credit card, leaving her $24,800. She received her car, with 14 payments remaining. She received her personal property and her clothing, including the designer pieces purchased over the previous 18 months that had, it turned out, also been partially funded through the joint account, in a pattern the forensic accountant had tagged, but which Raymond had elected not to pursue as a separate claim, because the amount was under the threshold where the cost of litigation exceeded. The recovery. Nathaniel let it go. He had the building and the business and the Harmon contract and 11 people who came to work every morning in a firm that carried his name on the letterhead, and none of that had required a single additional argument to keep. He moved back into the townhouse fully. He had been sleeping in the guest room for the last 6 weeks of the process. And on the first Saturday morning after the settlement was final, he went room by room through the building he'd renovated with his own hands and noted, without particular feeling, the spaces where her things had been and no longer were. The reading chair in the corner of the bedroom, the arrangement of small framed prints in the hallway she'd selected from a market they'd visited in the second year of the marriage, when things were still a version of what they had appeared to be. He did not fill the spaces immediately. He let them be empty for a while, the way you let a repaired joint cure before loading it. The following month, he refinished the bookshelves in the living room, a job he'd been putting off for 2 years because there had always been something with a deadline that mattered more. He did it on a Sunday, the shelves emptied and sanded and restained in a walnut that was 3 shades darker than the original, closer to what he had envisioned when he'd first put them in. He filled them back in a different order than they'd been before, organizing not by subject the way Camille had preferred, but by author and memory. His father's engineering texts on the top shelf, his own copies of the same books his father had read him passages from when he was 9, several volumes he'd bought from a second-hand shop near his university dormitory and carried across 4 apartments and a marriage without once putting them somewhere he couldn't easily reach them. The shelves looked the way they should have looked for years. He stood back and looked at them, and the satisfaction was clean and complete, and did not require anyone else to see it. He called his mother that Sunday at the usual time and told her everything. She listened to all of it, without a word. He told her about the post first, then the laptop, then the 14 months of email, then the hotel receipts, and the card ending in 4417, and the forensic accountant's report, and the overheard phone call, and the word blessed with its 314 likes, and the 47 comments from people who had no way of knowing. He told her about the 3 weeks of unchanged routine, the Tuesday dinners, the bridal shower box, the legal pad notes in the margin. He told her about the Monday the papers were served, and what he had said, and what she had said in return. He told it all the way he told everything, in sequence, without embellishment, each fact in its place. His mother was quiet for a long time after he finished, not the quiet of a woman deciding how much to say, but the full, patient quiet of a woman who had known for some months that a version of this call was coming, and had been allowing it to arrive in its own time. "You know," she said finally, "I watched her at Sunday dinners for 9 years. I watched her sit at this table, and eat food I cooked and talk about things she wanted, things she was going to do, places she was going to go. And in 9 years, not once, not a single Sunday, did she ask your father one question about his work. Not yours. His, your father who built the practice you learned from. She sat at the table every week with the man who taught you everything you know, and she never asked him a single question. She paused. That was not incidental. That is who she is. A person who is not curious about what the people around her have built is a person who has already decided those people are not worth building for. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Come for Sunday dinner, she said. We'll make the pepper soup. She paused one more beat. Your father will want to hear about the Harmon contract. He came. Okafor Structural broke ground on the first Harmon County Bridge rehabilitation site on a Tuesday morning in October. 9 months after the contract was signed, 14 months after the night of the Instagram post and the open laptop. Nathaniel stood at the east end of the site at 7 a.m. with Priya and his site foreman, the three of them reviewing the day's schedule. In the early light, the morning air carrying the specific smell of turned earth and concrete prep that he had loved since the first site visit of his career. When he was 23 and carrying someone else's plans, and had understood for the first time that the plans were the part that interested him most. He walked the length of the site from east to west without hurrying, his boots on the packed ground, the legal pad under his arm, and when he reached the far end he turned and looked back the full distance. The way he always did at the start of a job, taking the measure of everything between where he stood and where the work would finish. His name was on the contract, and on the firm's letterhead, and on the building deed, and on the LLC documents. And it had been on all of those things through every conversation she had ever had about what kind of man he was, and none of that had needed her to see it to be true. He made 2 notes on the legal pad, dated and timed them in the margin, and walked back toward the east end. He did not check his phone. There was nothing on his phone that required his attention more than the work in front of him. Camille had moved into an apartment on the other side of the city by then. A 2-bedroom she was sharing, according to the mutual acquaintance who mentioned it to Desmond without being asked, with a former co-worker who had been looking for a roommate at roughly the same time Camille was looking for a place to land. The Instagram account had gone private 3 weeks after the papers were served. Her last public post, still visible in the brief window before she restricted it, was a photograph of a coffee cup with a rain-streaked window behind it, and no caption. 44 likes. No comments about blessings. Desmond drove out to the site that morning with 2 coffees from the place near his office. The same coffee place they'd been going to since graduate school, the one with the terrible parking and the excellent espresso, and handed one through the window of the Cherokee as Nathaniel walked back to the lot at 9:30 a.m. He didn't ask how things were going. He knew how things were going. He'd been watching for 14 months, and watching without commentary was one of the things Desmond did best, and one of the reasons Nathaniel had called him the Thursday after the discovery and no one else. You look like yourself, Desmond said. I am myself, Nathaniel said. Yeah. Desmond looked at the site, the crew moving, the equipment positioned, the morning sun making the girders of the bridge structure throw hard, clean shadows across the packed earth. Your name's on all of it. It always was, Nathaniel said. She just never looked at the paperwork. Desmond nodded. He drank his coffee. There was nothing else to say about it, and they both understood that, and they stood in the lot for another few minutes watching the crew work before Desmond got back in his car, and Nathaniel got in the Cherokee, and they both went back to their separate mornings, unchanged in the ways that mattered. He drove back to the office with the coffee going cold in the cup holder, the rear gate rattling on the left turn out of the site entrance. the legal pad on the passenger seat with the morning's notes already dated and ready to be filed. He thought, briefly and without bitterness, about the Instagram post, the word blessed, the 314 likes, the chain of red hearts from people who had no way of knowing what the kitchen smelled like that night, or what the open laptop said, or what the man at the stove actually knew about how to hold something real together over 9 years without ever once needing to announce that he was doing it. He had been easy to manage, she had said. She had been wrong, not loudly, not dramatically, not in a way that required him to perform the wrongness for an audience. Just wrong. Quietly, completely, in every calculation she had made about what he was, and what he had, and what he would do when the picture finally came apart. He pulled into the lot at the townhouse, cut the engine, and sat for a moment with the Cherokee ticking down from the drive, the morning still going around him. And then he got out, carried the legal pad inside, and went to work. He did not look back at the site or the street, or the version of the story that had ended with a manila envelope on a kitchen counter. There was nothing there that needed him anymore. There was only the work, patient and specific, built to last, exactly as it had always been. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.